Welcome to Empowering the Unseen, a speaker series where we focus on stories and perspectives that aren't typically considered in the public narrative around HIV and AIDS. My name is Marisa. I am an intern with Until There's a Cure, and I'm incredibly excited to have some conversations with individuals about their experiences and expertise in HIV and AIDS advocacy, prevention, treatment, and education. I know I'm excited to learn something new, and I hope you can too. Thanks for tuning in. Just to get people a good idea of who you are, what are three main things that you value in your life, about yourself, other people, whatever that may be? I'd love to hear that to start off.
Okay, so the very first one would have to be honesty.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a Scorpio, so honesty, trust, that's like a big one. Um, Individuality. Um, I feel like with the internet, with the advent of like TikTok and sort of like all of these ways of people connecting. There's like a lot of hive-minded thinking lately. Like there's a lot of like everybody's like there's a lot of bandwagons people can jump on. So like when somebody's an individual and they actually have their own thoughts and ideas, that is really important to me. Um, and family and friends are like paramount, like number one. Like so. I think those would be the three things. Like I'm kind of lucky in the family and friends department. And but yeah, the honesty, honesty, individuality, and a solidified, when somebody knows who they are, you know, and they're solid in that, and family and friends. Family
Absolutely.
and friends is like a one.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. So you are a drag performer. I'm so excited to be talking to you about that because I'm in a small town, mountain town in North Carolina, and there's actually quite a big drag scene where I am amongst the college students. So I love to go see my friends at the bars on the weekends. I'm very excited to talk to you. I guess first and foremost, would you like to tell me kind of how you got into drag and performing in general?
Sure, sure. So, I came out, I grew up in South Boston, which is like notoriously very rough and very, wasn't the most hospitable environment for a young gay kid, or gender questioning kid or anything like that. But, um, because I was in the city, like, I knew that there were gay bars and gay clubs, like that they were around, you know what I mean? And like, when I would take the bus to high school, like the kids would make fun of like, yell out epithets at the gay bars as we passed them by on the bus. So I kind of got to know where those places were, but I was 13. Um and it was like that was like 1989. So I was 13. I really wasn't thinking that I was going to get in to like any of the clubs or bars. And I was sort of afraid to try quite yet. Then by the time I was 14, I um I started sneaking into the gay bars and clubs. And one of the easiest ways to get in with like using somebody else's ID was to put makeup on.
Hmm.
So you could just like go somewhere and put like makeup all over you and a wig and like, kind of disguise yourself and like use anybody's ID. And then you were in the door. And then to me, it was like I didn't care if I got to drink or anything like that. It was just about having a seat at the table,
Getting to
Often
be
I,
there.
yeah, often I would go to the bathroom and change right out of drag and like, just be like in the gay club.
Yeah.
But people started to get to know me because I was always sneaking out of my poor parents, like they, deserve a like to be sainted. Um, I was always sneaking out of the house, always going to gay clubs and so like doing that was something that I did very regularly, and people started to get to know me. And so they started to read me and say like, oh my God, your makeup is terrible, or this, that, or the, and school me on how to do it right. And before you knew it, like there she was, like a friend of mine who had a friend who was dying of AIDS at the time, whose drag name was Eileen Dover. I said, oh, can I carry on that name after she passes? And my friend asked her, and she said that she would be honored to have somebody carry on her name. So I took the name Eileen Dover, and that's kind of all she. The rest is history.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful that she asked you to carry that on. Yeah.
Well, I kind of asked her. I was
You
like, "Oh, I
asked.
love that name."
So can I carry this on? Fair enough. Well, it's wonderful that
Yeah.
he gave you the permission to do that and you've been able to carry that on all these years.
Now, I even trademarked it because it actually means something to me because I
Yeah.
have that, and it's not that I think that I'm the only one that's ever heard that joke or come up with that, like a pun name or whatever, but
Yeah.
like, I trademarked it because God forbid it went on RuPaul's Drag Race and then suddenly 30 years of me is erased in one.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. That's a whole part of your career. And also you have that special connection that is so meaningful. Absolutely.
yeah.
So with performing, is this how I know you are very passionate about HIV prevention and education? Is performing within the community part of how that became a passion for you and you incorporate that in other ways?
Well, so I went to an all boys Catholic high school and we had to do community service as part of our curriculum every year. We had to do 10 hours or something like that of community service. And I was like, I'm gonna do mine at the AIDS Action Committee at Boston because I wanted to get involved, and it was something that was taking out a lot of my friends. Like I was going to these clubs and I was meeting these people, and I kept losing people, and people just kept dying, and the government wasn't listening, and I was getting angrier and angrier and angrier. So I started volunteering at AIDS Action, and the Catholic school that I went to, Don Bosco, just to call it out,
Mhm.
um, they would not let me do my community service at AIDS Action Committee, but my mother wrote a letter and said, there is absolutely no reason why you will not, have my child, doing good work where good
Yeah.
work needs to be done, but they were
Go
very
on.
like,
Absolutely.
but my mom like was not I mean, she wasn't like, it wasn't like I came out and like she was like, ah, like it wasn't
Mhm.
all, fun and games.
Yeah.
It was a long learning curve for my family. And but she later told me, she's, like, well, I needed to know that you were going to get educated on that subject,
Mhm.
and she wasn't going to let, you know, the fact that it wasn't a subject that we had at our dinner table or anything like that get in the way of me being protected and
Yeah.
educated.
That's good. It's important. Um, and so have you continued over the years to volunteer at other places or work with HIV advocacy, words. Um,
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, for years I worked at I then went to school for like substance use issues and stuff like that. I became passionate about that because a lot of my friends were going out on drugs and alcohol, and I myself, like, had a skirmish or two, to be very, very, very gracious, like to be very polite,
to
more
be
than a
demure
skirmish.
about it.
Yeah, to be completely like
Very demure.
gloss over.
Have
Yeah,
you seen the demure trend on TikTok? Do you know what I'm talking about? The very demure,
yeah. I'm
very
just
mindful. I love
very
it.
mindful about,
Mhm.
not giving away the farm about my like
Anyways, continue.
yeah. So yeah, I to this day I am. I mean, it's definitely changed. I did work um in the field. I worked for Fenway Community Health,
Hmm.
and that was for about 7 years. And then after that, I worked at I worked like as my job at AIDS Action Committee, and then those two companies merged. And then here in New York, I have worked at several AIDS service organizations. And I do what I can, like, when there are shows to benefit, or, the marching, the anger, the act up, the throwing things at people, the actions that happened in the early 90s and the mid 90s.
Yeah.
The activism that was really sort of dramatic, you know, took place in my younger years. Now I sort of do just what I can.
Yeah.
I I am passing the torch, sort of, like saying, okay, like I'm getting older, and I think it's fair to let this new generation, the younger generation, decide what their issues want to be and what they want to fight for.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's theirs to take on. Absolutely. And since you've been sort of in this activism space and advocacy space for so long, have you seen slash how have you seen, um, I guess, public perceptions or public sentiment around this topic change?
Definitely there was like, I remember like situations in the early 90s where I would be in drag, or we would get pulled over by the cops, and cops would say something like, "Oh, don't touch that one. You might get AIDS." Or like, I mean, it was like that level of
Like that
ignorance,
level of, yeah.
complete cringe ignorance, to like, you know, now it's a manageable disease. Like it's like diabetes, it's manageable. That being said, I think there's a lot of apathy, and I think that there's a lot of it's still happening. It's still, my friends are still dying. I still
Mhm.
have friends that are dying of AIDS. And it's not over. Big Pharma has a great new, profitable illness that they can treat for years and years and years and years and years, but we don't have a cure. We don't have a vaccine.
Mhm.
So, that's what we were after. We
Yeah.
were, that's what I would encourage if I had to say anything to the younger generations that are taking on the fight, is demanding a cure, and I'll obviously always lend myself to that, like, but demanding a cure, like it's our cell phones can go to the moon, like, go to space and back for us to have this conversation like in minutes, but they can't cure diabetes, they can't cure HIV, they can't, you know, I think they can.
They can't just where you allocate the attention and the money. Yeah, that's not
Right.
so seeing apathy both in the sense of that with it becoming something that can be managed, people maybe not seeing as big of a deal. And then also, um, as you said, Big Pharma does profit off of this as being a continuous manageable issue and not feeling the push to find a cure. And I think our executive, I don't want to speak for her, but our executive director would love to hear you say, talking about demanding a cure as we're named until there's a cure and having that be the end goal and what we want to see for everyone in this. So yeah, thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think the public perception has definitely gotten better. I mean, it's nice that we don't have people saying ignorant things like, "Oh, don't touch that person because they're gay and they might have AIDS." Like, I mean, that was really what we were dealing with back then. That's how bad it was, like, but back then, and even to this day, like transgendered women are being murdered in the streets disproportionately, especially transgender women of color,
yeah,
being murdered in the streets, being treated um negatively by society, being, that they're also all of the people in society who are marginalized tend to also be disproportionately affected by things like HIV and health issues because of access and things of that nature. So, it's just it's more of a fight for some communities than it is for others.
Hmm.
Whereas like, for some people, PrEP is really available and in front of mind, and the meds are front of mind for a lot of folks. There are communities where, I mean, in countries like in African countries, there are people, entire generations of people that are still being wiped out by this.
Yeah, that is
So.
well put. That is a different fight for different groups of people, that there are different struggles. I mean, specifically something that was brought to my attention and starting to intern here is I did not realize that HIV and AIDS was such a big issue for women, particularly Black women in the South. So that's talking about the disproportionate fight for that, that comes with education, but also just access to things. So yeah, that's well put. I want to, I guess, go back a little bit more into your performing. So you're in New York, and I am interested if you could share kind of the transition from growing up in Boston and how you got to New York and on the New York scene.
So New York was always just a hop, skip, and a jump away. I
Mhm.
mean, it was just like really close to Boston. So when I was in high school, I had a Spanish teacher it was Catholic high school in the 80s. You've probably seen Spotlight. You know what
Mhm.
he was doing.
Yeah.
The vulnerable queer kid, he picked me, whatever. In your teens, you think you're in control of every situation. You think you know what's going, you think you know how to handle everything. So I
Yeah.
thought I was handling him, but he was writing permission slips home for me to like go away for the weekend and be on like yearbook committee or whatever. And I was going to New York every weekend. And then when I got graduated high school, I was working in the nightclubs. Um, and I was in New York at least once a week, at least.
Hmm.
And then I would just sometimes go to New York and couch surf for like months at a time in the 90s. And so I was always like known in both cities, or like, sort of like I had my feet in both cities. And I worked in the clubs in Boston. We would often book New York entertainers. So Lady Bunny and Candace Kane and Lena and all of those people were performers that we would book in Boston nightclubs. And so I got to know all of them, and just by coming to New York. So we kind of, there's like a group of us that are still around that are like this old school, like, 90s troupe
Hmm.
of queens who did it when it wasn't mainstream.
Yeah, yeah. And have you found, like, do you mentor younger people coming in who are performers as well?
They don't want it. They
They
don't want it.
don't.
No, I mean that used to be a big thing. But there's makeup tutorials, there's YouTube.
Uh,
They don't want an old queen in the way. Like
uh,
they don't want it. I mean, I don't know that I shouldn't say they all the queens don't want it. Like,
yeah.
but there's like more queens like per square mile now than,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like I feel like people do it, they maybe get into it for a little while and then they drop it. Back in the day, it was like a real commitment to a craft. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If you were gonna do it, you would do it, and you would become, it just felt like that the only people that were doing it were people that really wanted to do it, because
Yeah, this is
it's
a
not
lifetime
safe.
path.
Yeah,
Um,
it was not safe to like be out in the street and drag, or like it was not, oh, slay queen, that wasn't what you heard from a car passing by. It was like more like getting a brick thrown at you, like,
the Lord. Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, like, the transition from Boston to New York was very natural. It just,
Yeah.
and then I moved here for forever. So,
And so you say you have still have kind of a group of the same troupe of performers. Have there been any recent collaborations you've particularly enjoyed or any shows you'd want to share about?
Well, I just did a show called The Village, a disco daydream. I was the only drag queen in the cast, but that was an amazing collaboration with a bunch of artists and a bunch of people who are performers here in New York. And that was off Broadway. And I do a series called Reading for Phil, and it was Hattie Hathaway, Brian Butterick, who's a legendary, iconic drag queen from New York, used to run the Reading for Phil series, and it gives local authors the opportunity to workshop their stuff. There's Reading for Filth in the Nude, where people will get up and read their, stuff that they're writing naked, and people will sketch them. So when Hattie passed away, I decided to pick that up and run with it and continue it. Dean Johnson, who was a drag queen back in the 80s and the 90s, Dean Johnson originated Reading for Phil, and Hattie, got involved and took over it when Dean died, and I took over it when Hattie passed. Um, so yeah. I've done some collaborating with when Hattie was still alive. I did Glamour, Glory, and Gold, a Jackie Curtis play at Howell with Hattie, and I've done a few things with Linda Simpson, who's an old school drag queen, who wrote a book called The Drag Explosion, which is a really great snapshot of drag in the 80s and the 90s. So
I'm actually gonna I'll write that down on my books list.
I just like pan to my bookshelf and like you just jot everything down.
I was like, I'd be like, wait a second.
And we had this too. We had like not a lot of people remember this, but we had the gay yellow pages. It was
Hmm.
like this was like the green book. It told us like sort of like if you go to Missouri, these are the hotels that won't be homophobic towards you. If you go to, the South, where or inhospitable places for queer people. These are the
Mhm.
places that like it's a little like sort of book that told us,
Oh, yeah.
where we go.
That's awesome. I mean, that's really important because I've been lucky to grow up in very more liberal leaning pockets of the South, and I uh was a theater kid growing up, was in art school in middle school, and then again in high school for opera singing. So I've been very lucky to be in accepting spaces, but it's true that you drive 20, 30 minutes the wrong way, and it's very different sentiment, um, even today. So yeah, that's
That could be said even for New York City, though. Like
yeah.
if you get on the Staten Island ferry, Staten Island is tends to, and I'm not saying that Republicans are synonymous with hating gay people, but
No,
like it's a very Staten Island is the only red borough in New York City, and they tends to be the folks who
there are some trends.
there are some friends, yeah,
There are some exceptions and some trends.
exactly.
Yes, yes. Well, I am getting close to my little time limit on my meeting, but I guess to wrap things up on a slightly lighter note, I saw that you have a love for animals, and
Oh yes.
I would love to hear about that. Tell me about, um, yeah, just tell me about your love for animals and how that shows up in your life.
I just love dogs. I
Mhm.
love cats. I love animals like of any like if I'm visiting a friend and they have a pet, I'm just like all about the pet. Like me and my ex-boyfriend, who would have been my husband had marriage been legal.
Mhm.
We had a dog together, and I had a dog growing up, a beagle who was 17, and um I've just always loved animals. I think they're more evolved than humans. They're just in the moment and
Yeah.
present,
But
you
that is
know.
what with dogs, because dogs are always so, and cats too in their own way, but dogs are always so attuned to how people are feeling. And, sometimes we got to go to years of therapy to get back to that. Um, that's very well put.
Yeah, they haven't learned anything that they need to unlearn, like we
Mhm.
have to unlearn stuff all the time, like, even just like negative self-talk or whatever. But dogs are really like dogs bring me to my Zen place, like they're just amazing. There's no bad dogs. There's no bad dogs.
There's no bad dogs.
There's bad dog owners, but there's no bad
Mhm.
dogs.
Do
Yeah,
you
they're
currently have
just
any
amazing.
pets right now?
I don't have a partner. I don't have anybody that I live with. So I think it would just be selfish for me to have a pet where I'm like working and out all the
Yeah.
time and not able to give the pet
The full
the
attention. Yeah. Yeah.
right. But I do dog sit and I do
Mhm.
like I'm Auntie Eileen, like, when anybody wants to drop their dog off, they know that I'm always down.
Yes. I love that. The fur baby's auntie. I am also as a college student, I can't handle the pet scenario at the moment, but I am always looking for dog sitting, cat sitting opportunities. Or my older sister has a cat. We'll be like, "You're going away. You know where to bring it."
Yeah, exactly. It
Uh,
must bring you like because college is stressful, like
mm.
it must focus you or calm you down.
It
Like,
really does bring you zen and just makes your heart happy.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're just unconditional love, and that's all, which is I think what everybody's looking for. So
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, Eileen. And I appreciate
absolutely,
you sharing all your insights and your story as well with me. So yeah, I guess I'll sign off with that.
absolutely. Thank you.